Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Oh, that was not a good pause. I'll just briefly note real quick. The reason there's black gloves there is you can see this is fall. You know what this is like. He's performing outside. So the significance of this is at the Wynn residence. If you guys remember the trail cam and the burn pit and all that, and like being caught on camera and all the rest at the Wynn residence in Marietta, Georgia, this is where this is at. And so obviously it's fall. So the significance of the gloves there is he probably wore those, not even probably, he definitely wore those right up until he started playing to keep his hands warmed up. That's why. Like here before the homicide. In Italy with Aida. about your students. There's a microphone. You probably think out loud to the audience, and I hate that that's not included in the speaker. You can hear him talk. But he definitely speaks to the audience. I think it would be a great idea program, you know, for certain inmates to learn music. I mean, if there'd be like a reward, you know, so they don't just walk around in circles. I mean, you know, it's a real. Hi, P Fox, welcome. You guys hear me better when it's in nobody's. Oh, actually, I think I'm automatically adjusting the mic. Okay, hold on. Almost anything I was normal for other musicians. Not only is we can't shake our heads on the violin. That's normal. You have Future's hey, hi Future. Oh, that's funny. Are you up on this case, Future? And this, by the way, is the Beethoven Sonata in B flat major. On a clavier. So that means piano. This is a late sonata written towards the end of his life. never thought I would see the day when classical music overlaps with murder, but here we are. Incredible. Being in custody, I can't even imagine what that would probably be the first time not being able to crazy. Injuries and stuff. It's hard to even put words what that's like. And it's a part of your life every single day, your whole life. You probably started when you were 3 years old, like I did. Great point from PSN here. But he's playing it from memory. There's no music. He's got a piece of Kleenex. Everything that he has on his all performing from memory is pretty difficult. There you go. So that was a performance given from, so this is November of 2020, November 22nd of 2020. So remember, at this point in time, Mello has absconded to Italy with the daughter, and this is less than a year before the homicide. So let me pull this down. DSN asking a good question here. What is he going to be able to testify about? We're going to get into all that. So let me pull up. What we're going to do is we're going to watch the defense opening statements, which are brief, and then we're going to go through some of the things that happened today that were off camera, which was a lot because basically we didn't know what was going to happen this day, right? And so, you know, as you can see, the court feed here was 5.5 hours long. It's all, you guys can see here, it's all the wall. Oh, wait. They bring him in for a little bit. there is one witness, and then, but other than that, it's just the defense opening. And so what I was noticing as I kept checking, I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, there's a lot happening outside the presence of the jury. There's a lot of things going on. And so we're going to learn from people reporting from the courtroom what was going on. But let's take a look at this bombshell defense opening here. Banner. So remember, for anyone who didn't see the original opening statements, the state's opening was 7 minutes long, and then the defense said they were going to defer their opening until their case in chief. And I'm sure the reason was because they weren't sure yet what was going to go on with that motion in limine, if the state was going to open the door, and they were working on that happening essentially.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that y'all had a nice rest and break. As I've indicated before, I do
Correct.
need to ask you, has anyone
Use of murder, yes.
on news, done any kind of investigation, found out anything about this case? Okay. No one from the jury has indicated they have done such. Okay.
I don't know. Could be his parents.
Thank you. May it please the court.
All right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Now it's our turn. Mr. Moore and I have been waiting for a long while to be at this point. I was going to say it's been a week, but it's been longer than a week. It's been years. Our client, Zach Hughes, has been waiting for a lot longer than that. He's been waiting over 3 years, some 3 years and 3 months. As Mr. Mormon told you at the outset of this case, we are honored and privileged to be representing Zach. You're going to hear about Zach in the next day or two. You can hear that he's a very gifted and accomplished young man. He is 32 years old now. He was 29 when this happened. He's from a wonderful family. You've probably seen them seated back here in the courtroom throughout
Family supporting
this trial so far. You're going to hear a little bit about his life. He was born in California. When he was still a boy, his parents took Zach and his brother, moved him to southwestern Virginia, where they moved into a small farm, and then they took on 5 orphan children who lived there with them. And you can
Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm going to just real quick for Abby here, and anyone else who doesn't, who's like, motions in limine, as people sometimes call them colloquially, motions in lemonade. So a motion in limine can be made by either party. If it's a criminal case, then it can be made by the prosecution or the defense, and it's basically to keep certain things out of the trial. That it can even be as it pertains to expert witness testimony, but it's usually going to be pertaining to testimony. So you make the request to the judge to have certain evidence not to be excluded, and usually this can be. Oftentimes we talk about the balancing act, and that's really relevant here between probative and prejudicial. So that's the main thing here, to address potentially prejudicial or irrelevant or inadmissible information. And here, the motion in limine that is such a big deal was made by the state, and it was to keep out anything related to the CP. You guys hopefully know what I'm referencing there. And the reason is because the CP in this case involves the victim. It involves the victim, the victim's fiance, and the victim's fiance and the victim's child from another baby daddy. And so you have the minor child, right? So there's that. But in terms of where it became in the judge's view, more prejudicial and probative is because of the victim also being involved. If the victim were not involved in the CP, it'd be a completely different thing. And in fact, we are going to learn that the defense wanted to call the minor child as a witness in this case, in their case in chief, to testify about the abuse and the CP. And again, if the victim had not been involved in all of that, then that would have, then this motion in limine likely would not have been granted. So the judge granted the state's motion in limine. And so what has happened so far during the state's case in chief is the defense has several times argued to the judge that the state opened the door, right? As we know, and this happens in a lot of trials. Murdoch was a big one, right? Where if the state opens the door, then they can get into it. And every time the defense argued to the judge that the state opened the door, it was overruled. So, so at this juncture, that is still the case. Now, the state could still open the door, for example, if on cross-exam for any of the defense witnesses. If on cross-exam, they're asking a witness any questions that get into that territory, the state could still open the door. It's not a done deal yet. Yes, Abby, that is exactly it. And welcome, Kane. Happy to see you again. Yes, thank you, Franks, for that. There's a lot. This case has, for anyone who's new to it, has been called by many, and I would agree, the most complex, complicated case that anyone's ever known of. It has so many layers, it's hard to even wrap the head around. This case is crazy, and it's not a long trial thus far. This is only day 5. We're on the defense case in chief. They moved through these witnesses really quickly. So for anyone who doesn't want to get caught up, of course, I have a playlist for the other days. We've been diving into this head first because this is such a fascinating and interesting case, and for so many reasons. And again, for me, it was like, wait, what? A Juilliard trained pianist murder? Like what? So I don't have any mods, Kane. It's just me and Nightbot over here. So yes, so we're hearing about his background a little bit here. They had, I'll back it up for a second. I think five orphan children or something that they had adopted. Let's see.
Zach and his brother moved to southwestern Virginia, where they moved into a small farm, and then they took on 5 orphan children who lived there with them.
Just to clarify, the piano man, Zach Hughes, is not involved in the CP at all. Does not involve him. So that's why the CP is the victim's fiance, who already testified. He's currently in custody, awaiting trial for a number of charges involving the CP. There's a number of civil suits going on with the CP that we covered last night. And so the defense wants the CP to come in, because we're going to hear why in a second. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't heard, but the state doesn't want the CP to come in because it would be prejudicial against the victim.
You can hear that Zach was homeschooled. He learned the value of hard work and discipline as he grew up around the family farm. He helped his young siblings.
Is Nightbot not
his family moved to Greenville when Zach was a teenager. In Greenville, he finished high school, being homeschooled still. And you'll hear that his hard work and his discipline paid off, and he was accepted into a very fine college with scholarships. He went on where he studied music, and he won piano competitions.
Correct, yes.
His emphasis was on piano performance. As an adult, Zach has had an accomplished career performing classical music and even recording classical music. So this is the time now for our case and for Zach to testify. But understand, ladies and gentlemen, that we have no obligation under the law or the Constitution.
So right there, he just said for Zach to testify. So it hadn't even occurred to me until we talked about this last night that he would even testify. In fact, there was a lot of thought that maybe the defense wouldn't even put on a case in chief, because where the state rested their case on day 4, it was like, the way I described it was like, if you're on this jury, you have a big question mark, like what the fuck is going on here? And there was a lot of thought, and still think it might have been a good strategy, we'll see, for the defense to say, and they could have said this today, we're not going to put on a case. The state didn't prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. We rest, and then it would have gone on to closing arguments, and then the jury would have been tasked with deliberating starting today, and it could have resulted in an acquittal because it was like, again, the big question mark. That's what I imagine the jurors were like. But they're putting on a case, and they've already referenced Zach testifying.
To be doing this. This case actually could be over when the state rested.
There we go.
The state has the burden of proof of proving this case in every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. We would not have to put up anybody. Zach wouldn't have to testify. Wouldn't have to put up any witnesses. In fact, if Zach were not here, his honor would instruct you that you couldn't use that against him. But we are going to do so. And Zach is going to testify because Zach has been waiting for this opportunity to tell a group of people like you what really happened.
So from word on the street, we were watching last night some of the from Fitz News, who has been on this case since day one because they're in South Carolina. They're there in trial every day. They were saying that his family is extremely supportive, that they've been there every day. They were there for all the other previous hearings, and that not just the family, but many people in the public. They said he's got a ton of support, the defendant does.
Which is that he took the life of Christina Parcell. And crucially, he's been waiting and wanting to tell you why. Now, the why to a case like this is very important because it goes to the heart of the matter, and that is malice. Okay, malice is what makes a homicide.
So before he gets into malice, and that's important. We'll talk about that. So the thing is that I think that the decision also to have him testify, again, I think goes back to this motion in limine, which was such a big deal because remember, in an opening statement, and also the fact that they deferred their opening statement till now. In an opening statement, you can only say what the evidence will show. So like a good example is like in the Ezra McCandless trial, where when they did their opening statements, the defense in that case, and they did that at the beginning, they already went in and talked about things that only Ezra could testify to. So they went ahead and pretty much said, like, in other words, there's things that they wanted to be able to say to the jury. The evidence will show, da, 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 da. And if those are things that can only come in through testimony from the defendant, then they're saying the defendant's going to testify, even though they still are going to go through the colloquy and all that at that point in time. But yeah, so in other words, had the state opened the door, or had the motion in limine been overruled and not granted initially, and had the CP evidence been able to come in, potentially maybe they wouldn't have had Zach testify, because then that evidence would come in. What the defense here wants, the defense wants evidence of the CP to come in. And if that was able to come in previously because of Brad Post, the fiance, right, when he testified, or other witnesses about the CP, had that been able to come in, they maybe would not have needed Zach to testify, because it would have been maybe made clear or implied to the jury, hey, when you think about vigilante justice, right, and motivating someone to commit vigilante justice, right, I don't know that there's any better potentially circumstance that you could suggest to a jury other than saving a child from this type of environment, right? So, but again, because the motion in limine still stands, then that is all the more reason why, if they're going to hear about it, they and what they're going to hear, could come from the defendant. Now, it's going to get more complicated because, well, we're going to get into that more. We're going to get into that. So it's going to be interesting to see what he's going to be allowed to testify to. But as far as the malice, remember, in the state's opening statements, it was really odd because when the prosecutor was like, what is murder? And the way he described murder was, he says, murder means you have malice in your heart. It means you're mad. And I was like, huh? Come again? He didn't even say anything about it means you kill somebody because you're mad. He just said it means you have malice in your heart and you're mad. So, and I said, wait, what? What are they talking? Like, this makes no sense. So so now this defense attorney is addressing the malice factor here.
Now, the why to a case like this is very important because
you don't know about the roses or the cocaine.
That is malice. Okay, malice is
right.
What makes a homicide a murder, and we heard from that from the prosecution's opening,
no.
as you recall.
If you're
The
asking me,
prosecution said that Zach was mad.
mellow.
They said he had an angry heart, that he wanted to inject himself into this custody dispute of somebody he knew.
Yes.
But that's not why it happened. And that is not what you were going to hear about why this happened. Now, as we turn to our case now,
Yeah,
it's
I think
important to realize
Future makes a great point, because one of the things that the state never addressed is how he got in the door, because the door was locked. There's the whole thing about the door, and we've talked about that extensively. Both doors are a huge issue in this case that the state never closed the loop on. But I do think that this is a good point, because we had talked about what was the deal with the flowers. Now, the thing is that's really interesting is that the way that the crime scene, right, the flowers and the rose petals were dispersed everywhere. So I think potentially, I agree with you, Future, that potentially used it to sort of get her to open the door. And then maybe they had a dual purpose as well, right? Because in other words, the way that the flowers were dispersed, it didn't look like there was just a fight and then that's how they got there, right? Because they were so spread out. They were in her purse. They were all over the place, that I think there was also staging involved, and there was also staging with a bag of cocaine. So the flowers could have served a dual purpose there. The wildflower part was interesting, though. We still don't know what the fuck that was about, because it was mostly roses, and then there was like a couple clumps of some wildflowers. And Mello did start making allegations in 2017 about the CP. We covered that last night with the lawsuits. It's complicated. We're gonna talk about why here in a second when we pull up some other stuff. But it was also reported to DSS. Again, don't worry. We're gonna pull up stuff that shows you guys this.
We could have handled this case extremely differently. Okay, we could have attacked the sufficiency of the state's case. We could have brought in an expert to talk about the DNA. Okay, we didn't do that. We could have challenged the identification evidence. And I want you to consider the professional from law enforcement, from the state.
Another DSN, also a valid theory. That was my first thought. The escort thing with cocaine and flowers, that was the other thing, because being an escort, that was a whole thing that's a huge part of this case as well, that the victim was also maybe an escort. Yeah.
State law enforcement division who testified about the enhancement that they did on the videos and the photographs, and how they were able to use this fancy technology to enhance and to account for the differences between sunlight and shadow and the distance. And after all of that, and after all of the technical work that was done, the conclusion was that the guy on the bicycle was 6'5", a big guy like him. Well, as you probably noticed, and as you will see, Zach is shorter than I am. On a good day, I'm 10 foot. I'm 6 foot, 5 foot 10 inches. Okay, he's shorter than I am.
So she had professional. The victim had no drugs in her system except for ones that were maybe prescribed for ADHD or something like that, they said. And also she was drug tested regularly as part of her job, and also because of the child custody dispute. So it doesn't seem like she actually was using drugs. That seems like highly unlikely given the amount of drug testing and stuff.
Who spent a great deal of time looking at the enhancement of the person on the bicycle. And after all that time, what was that conclusion? That this person had a beard. It has to be a man. And they enlarged it, and they used again all of that technical information.
Now this is interesting. I don't know why he's going into all this. If he's going, this sounds to me like he's trying to suggest that wasn't the defendant, right? But that doesn't make any sense if you're then going to be like, well, the defendant did do this, right? I don't know why. I don't know. We'll see what he's going to get to.
Got it. This guy had a beard. This is before they had any suspects. Well, what do we know about Zach and what we learn about Zach? He was clean shaven. We know that from a couple of days prior, and we know that from a couple of days after. We could have attacked that. We could have attacked the identification from the neighbor. As you remember, a neighbor after 3 years
disaster
came into court. And all of a sudden, after 3 years, was able to identify the man whose picture had been on television for the past 3 years. Had never told anybody even that she could identify somebody. And this was somewhere between 8 and 8:15 in the morning. And what you're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, is that couldn't have happened because the person on that bicycle was not even in that neighborhood for at least an hour to an hour and 15 minutes later.
Well,
but we didn't attack that. We could have done that, and we could have made mountains of objections throughout this trial. And as
that's
you heard,
true.
we made very few.
You didn't even cross.
And we did not do it. And
They
why
didn't even cross the vast majority of witnesses. They only crossed a handful of witnesses. Very unusual.
is that? Because Zach wants to take the stand and tell you what happened.
Yeah.
Now, the prosecution has told you that they will prove this malice in this case by showing you that Zach was mad. That he
Right.
was angry.
That's what they said.
And malice is a key part of this case because malice is the very essence of the definition of murder. Okay. So what is murder? Murder is the killing of somebody with malice aforethought.
At least he used the word killing
And
this
what is
time instead of the
malice?
state just saying malice.
The prosecution told you it's anger, that it's madness, and that is a component of it. The definition, though, it is the killing of a person
With malice aforethought.
without just cause or excuse. The intentional doing of a wrongful act without just cause or excuse. And I want you to think about those words, that definition, as you listen to the testimony that you're about to hear in this case. The why to the homicide is very important because it gives insight into the person's heart.
Hmm.
In this case, you were going to hear that the why was not jealousy or greed or a crime of passion or some other emotion. You're going to hear that Zach did not act like an angry heart like the prosecutor conjectured. You're going to hear that this was not done for money or any other personal gain or benefit, not to help out any kind of friend. You're going to hear that this was done for a just cause. And that's not malice, and that's not murder. Thank you.
Councilman Brooke?
Okay, so they're approaching, and then I think they come right back here, and I think he dismisses the jury.
Okay, welcome back. I would have kept you in here if I had knew I was going to get my answer so quickly. It is 12 o'clock. I'm going to ask that y'all return at 1:30. We're going to take a break, enjoy your lunch, and then we will pick up at that point. Again, I remind you of everything that I've punished you about before, and do not begin any kind of deliberations or discussions about this case. Okay, we'll see you back at 1:30. Thank you.
So Fender, right, or sorry, shout out to Fender, by the way, future, yes. I would say it's honestly more like 43 pieces. You guys, let's all say, let me know in the chat, how many puzzle pieces, if you've been following this, do you think the jury has at this moment? We can't really speculate as to how many they will have after the defense's case of you, but at this point, let's just say, if you're on this jury, and at this point in time, how many puzzle pieces do they have for a 1,000 piece puzzle? I would go with 43. That's just my personal take on that. So now, again, we don't have anything from the court until we get one witness briefly. I'll just get this queued up. So now what I'm going to do is pull up this here. Okay. So what are we looking at? So this is from a local news outlet who has been giving like updates throughout the day, right? So we're going to start with the beginning of the day. So prior to the opening statements, the first thing that happened in the day, right? Because remember, when we were looking at the court feed, it was like hours of nothing. And then we had the defense opening statement. So what was going on? So what was going on is this. So first thing in the morning, the state says they've received briefs from the defense that lead them to believe Hughes's attorney will suggest Hughes was acting in defense of Mello's daughter. and that's also the victim's daughter. The state says this argument doesn't hold up because the daughter was not in imminent danger at the time of the murder because she was at school. So this is a matter of law here, right? Imminent danger. So imminent danger, like that is one of those things that they can argue both sides, right? Like imminent. So the state is saying imminent danger is like literally at that exact second and the daughter was at school. Notice they're not arguing she wasn't in imminent danger because the alleged, I don't even know if you can call it alleged at this point, the abuse, the CP, like that type of thing. They're not saying that it's because that was never happening. They're saying it's because she was at school. So they're arguing the imminent factor here. Okay. So that's one thing. Okay. So now this is quoting them from when they're arguing. And again, all of this we don't get to see, unfortunately. The defense said if the minor, okay, just so that we've already used her name. Her name has been used. Well, they're redacting the name. They've said the name on the record in court. Okay. It was in the opening statements from the state. So we're going to use her name. So if Aida Mello had the right to defend herself from this repeated sexual abuse, so did Zach Hughes have the right to defend her. The defense is saying. Actually, so hold on, let me read this in order. So Hughes' attorneys on the defense of others' defense. This is what this case is about. Remember, the defense says that they have evidence that Parcells and Mello's daughter was being sexually abused by Parcell in post. If the state has maintained the allegations about Parcell are unsubstantiated. And part of that, I think, came from the guardian ad litem, which we're going to get into. And then the defense. If Aida Mello had the right to defend herself from this repeated sexual abuse, so did Zach Hughes have the right to defend her. The defense says the daughter was in imminent danger, referencing the immediate actions taken by the deputies in family court to remove the girl from the home after the evidence of post crimes were found. So what happened was after the homicide, right? Because the fiance, that's Bradley Post. So where it says Post here, the fiance Bradley Post, after the homicide, he was the one that found the body, right? So, and naturally he's like going to be a first natural suspect. So they took his phone and everything, and he was arrested, like I think exactly a week later after the homicide. And he was not arrested for murder. He was arrested for all these different charges related to CP. So that's where the evidence of the crimes were found. Now, remember, prior to that, these allegations had been made for years from the child's father, John Mello, since 2017. And they were made through, allegations in civil suits. But in terms of criminal action, the evidence wasn't found until after the homicide. The judge says he will take a while to consider the arguments. How old was the daughter at which point? At the murder? She was 5 years old in 2017 when the first allegations were made of sexual abuse and I guess the allegations that John Mello was making, he didn't say sexual abuse, he said CP. And so she was 5 at the time. And she's like, I think 12 or 13 now. So yeah, she might have been around 8. I think that's accurate, around 8 at the time. Yeah, of the homicide. Okay, so then this is judge excludes the defense of others' defense, says there was no imminent danger to the daughter and no immediate need to act. Now, the thing is this, I've tried to find the full document. I'm sure it will be available at some point. And by full document, I mean the defendant's motion to use this defense of others of defense, basically. But so far, all I've been able to find is one page. And so I'm going to show that to you guys now. And this was from Fitz News. So this is one page from that motion that they were discussing this morning, right? So here we go. So return to Greenville. I'm just going to read from where it picks up here. And he agreed to pick up Mello from the airport when he was able to return. Unfortunately, none of these measures served to make AM, that's Aida Mello, any safer. Zach did more to try to save AM. In June and July of 2021, Zach mailed publicly available. So they're saying, okay, these images that the state has alleged are part of his kid, because he also has the harassment charges, right? And those relate to these different images that were being disseminated. So the defense is also attacking that charge here by saying this was him acting ahead of time, trying to save the daughter. That's what they're saying here. So Zach mailed publicly available pornography. So in other words, all of these things that the state is saying, these are his crimes, is what he's charged. They're saying, they're taking all those things and saying, no, those were his attempts to save the daughter. Okay. Mailed publicly available pornographic images. Now the publicly available part is important because it's been unclear as to whether she was actually an escort or if it was all fabricated. And again, that's all Mello's doing. But I feel like, what was it that came out? it seems to come out at some point that it was both, that it was legitimate, like she was an escort, but that some of the images that Mello sent to Zach to disseminate were also images that were maybe just he had because he was in some of those pictures or something. So, and the problem is that Mello complicates everything because he tends to manipulate. I mean, he's been manipulating everybody, and he makes you question, was it real or was it not real? Anyway, there's been some thoughts by some people in the chat that are completely valid that maybe AI has been involved. Anyway, so, but here we're getting another affirmation, again, this is from the defense, that these were publicly available, which would mean this was she actually was on a website as an escort, right? And anybody could have come across that. So pornographic images of Parcell to Parcell, her neighbors Post and Cormillo. Now, Cormillo is the guardian ad litem that testified for the state on day 2. And she was an incredible witness. And highly recommend if you didn't see her testimony to watch it. But one of the things she did, right, as a guardian ad litem was to look into these allegations made by John Mello. So when as the guardian ad litem of the daughter during this heated custody dispute, when John Mello made these allegations of CP and abuse and whatever, she looked into it and she was there was no question in her testimony, right, that John Mello was the one behind all of the harassment of sending shit out, right, like what we just read, but also that she believed that the daughter was thriving, that she was living a full life, that the mother was fit to have her, and all this. Now, what she couldn't say is she didn't flat out deny and say, oh, there was no evidence of CP. Why? Because that couldn't come in, right? So she couldn't get asked that question. Another interesting thing to note is that John Mello also accused the guardian ad litem of being involved of producing and disseminating CP and all this. So all the same, it was interesting. All the allegations that we've seen John Mello make against other people, he was also making against like this guardian ad litem, who's an attorney, and threatening her and threatening her children and her family. I mean, it's next level stuff. And so, anyway, so that's who that is. When you see that with that name, Cormillo, that's the guardian ad litem. So in hopes that these mailings would prompt Parcell to realize that at least some people knew what she was doing to AM. Now, I just have to say, just to push back on this a little bit, right? If you're trying to save the child, I don't know that I agree that this is a persuasive argument, right? That you're trying to save the child, so you're going to disseminate these pictures and hope that the people will stop. No, you call law enforcement. That's what I would say. And the jury's probably going to think something like that too. Also, why are they spelling the name with a K? Anyway, Zach also hoped these mailings would prompt law enforcement, the guardian ad litem, and the family court to more fully investigate AM's home life and discover the abuse. Zach was wrong. The recipients of these mailings did not act on them. But now, this is where it gets interesting. Zach submitted an affidavit to the guardian ad litem and the family court on September 21st, 2021. This is less than a month before the murder. The murder, for anyone who is catching up, the murder was October 13th of 2021. Now, this affidavit is there. That's to the court, right? In other words, this can't be made up. This has to actually exist. However, I will say it could be that this was on purpose to try to set this up ahead of time, right? If you're the state, you could argue that this is all part of the premeditation to try to set up not similarly to how people might set up an alibi, but in this case, it's not an alibi. It's to set up, I don't know. Also, though, we know he was being prompted by John Mello to think these things were true and to act on his behalf and all this. So anyway, okay, so Zach submitted an affidavit to the guardian ad litem and the family court on September 21st, 2021, in which he alleged that AM needed to be with Mello for her own good. And remember, Mello wanted custody. That's part of what makes it so complicated, right? Because Mello was making these allegations that she's an escort and she's involved in CP and all this stuff. And actually, I think he maybe mentioned something with drugs too. But people will do that in child custody disputes to try to get custody, and he wanted custody. So that's where, again, it's just tricky because now we don't know what's real and what was fabricated. And it's just, okay, the affidavit had no impact whatsoever. And again, remember, the guardian ad litem looked into these things and didn't find anything to support or substantiate any of these allegations. That's what she said on the stand. Now, in a last ditch effort, Zach called DSS. That's like you know how like CPS is normally called in other states, right? It's the same thing. It's the Department of Social Services. So it's the same thing. These are the people who save the children, right? So Zach called DSS at the end. There would be a recording of this would be on the record, right? At the end of September, beginning of October of 2021, it reported to DSS personnel that AM was being abused. DSS did nothing. Now, this is where this is going to be at the heart. Now, this is in their motion right ahead of time. So I have it. Let me see what you guys are saying in the the chat. Good. This is a good question, Abby. I mean, it's tough. It's really tough. I will say this. But for John Mello, we wouldn't be here, I don't think, in my personal opinion, from what I've seen, and it's really layered and really complicated. The only reason why Zach Hughes even knows who Christina Parcell, the victim, even knows who she is because of John Mello. Like they somehow became friends, apparently also became lovers or something. And, you know, John Mello moves away to Italy and then is feeding all this information to Zach. Like there's 100% a lot of gaslighting and a lot of manipulation. And we even heard from one of the Fitz News journalists who met with John Mello twice, like that John Mello manipulated and like gaslit essentially every single person who knew him. Is like his MO, right? Is making these allegations about people. And so at the outset, it really looks kind of like almost like incentivizing someone to be a hitman. Like it almost looks like incentivizing someone potentially to like, okay, if you're John Mello and you want custody, right? Which is the case, he wanted custody. It's like by making these allegations against the mother, right? The victim, you're doing twofold here. You're trying to hope that the court will find that she's not fit to have custody and then you can have custody. But two, or B, A and B, you're involving Zach Hughes into this and giving him the same information. And maybe the motive for John Mello was to motivate Zach Hughes to feel like he should take justice into his own hands because John Mello can't because he's in Italy. They might have even had a conversation, who knows, where Mello's like, you know, I would do something, but I'm away in Italy and you're there, you're nearby. We don't know. But what would support that also, again, is like we've got the defense saying there's vigilante justice type of stuff going on, right? So my read on this is that John Mello, and I mean, there's been a lot of thought too, like, is John Mello, like, I think of him, and I'm not the only one, this is what they were saying too on Fitz News, thinking of him as an unindicted co-conspirator, similar to like the Adelson case, right? Like Blendy. In fact, previous live streams, I said several times as we went along and learned more information, I'm like, oh, wow. Mello is Wendy. Mello's the one at the top, right? The unindicted co-conspirator that it's like, when are they going to come from? That is still my thought on this with Mello. And so it's like, and it's just so interesting too, because remember, this was done with a knife. And like, this is a Juilliard trained classical pianist. It's just bizarre. All of it is crazy. So I feel like personally, again, there's no question that but for John Mello, Zach wouldn't be here. This wouldn't be happening. We wouldn't, maybe someone else would be standing trial, but it wouldn't be Zach. And when you look at someone who had just accomplished right before the murder, right before the murder, he finished this, he did this thing, this huge thing of performing all of the Beethoven sonatas for memory, like the first person to do it. It's like this huge deal. And it was like 2 weeks after that, the murder. It's like when you're classically, it just doesn't, throwing your life away, right? I mean, we see this all the time, but especially when you're like, it just. So what law enforcement did testify that I don't know about the Wayback Machine. They didn't say Wayback Machine when they testified. Law enforcement testified that they tried to find it and they couldn't find that it existed at the time. And then the defense on cross was like, but websites can get put up and taken down. And he was like, yeah, they can. I never heard anything about a Wayback Machine. And so And that absolutely, there's never a justification for murder. You know, it's sort of like, it's this whole thing of like, if somebody is like, so I guess the way to put it is instead of being team Piano Man, it's like, I personally am team, we need to get John Mello, right? And we've talked a lot about too, how maybe like, we've talked a lot about too, like, was it even Zach? Could Bradley Post have actually done this, right? The other thing is this, the window of time for this homicide to happen, if it was at the time when, if it was at 9:15 in the morning when they have the, you know, the suspect who seems to be the defendant, right, on camera at the doorstep, 9:15, 11 and a half minutes, 11 and a half minutes with 35 different sharp force wounds. Now, remember, most of those were superficial, but still 35 sharp. And then also the staging of the crime scene, 11 and a half minutes. So we've just, that's why this is so complicated, because we've discussed how like, maybe he didn't, maybe that's not when the murder happened. Maybe it happened after that. And maybe it was Brad Post. And the things supporting that, the shit we've talked about with the back door, guys, is insane. There's so much that doesn't add up. And the back door is huge here. Go back and watch on the previous live streams. We talked about it last night and I think the night before. There's things that can't, there's things about the back door that don't have an explanation unless Brad Post was something's up with that. Something's up with that. So again, like, while I, of course, can't ever condone vigilante justice unless you're Batman, and murder's never the way. I do think that Zach was 100% manipulated by John Mello. And so my thought is like, what I would have hoped is, I would have hoped that if Zach did this as is alleged, and if he did it on behalf of John Mello, which is what I think happened, that he would have, you know, done what most people do and taken a plea deal and offered up John Mello, right? He didn't do that. And I think that speaks to just the level of manipulation that persists to this day, personally, at this juncture. This case is so crazy. I wouldn't be, something could come out to completely obliterate those thoughts and it could change. Right. Again, and in order to do that, he would have had to, that's the thing. The manipulation and the gaslighting runs deep. In fact, we've been calling Mello Moriarty on other streams. He's like Moriarty, honestly. And he's got so much money, and it's like, and the other reason I say Moriarty, he's like a ghost in this case. The jury hasn't even seen a picture of him. They've heard about him throughout. And the first thing that people thought when this happened, the murder, everybody first thought like, you know, of course, in terms of who's a good suspect, well, the fiance, but everybody at testified was like John Mello. Even with the harassment, John Mello. Everyone's like, Mello's behind this. And then they're like, well, he's in Italy. He has an alibi. I mean, and that's it. So, but again, in order for him to, like, I don't even think claiming coercion. I think it was, there's no question to me that there was manipulation, gaslighting, coercion, but he would have had to turn on John Mello. And I think that just speaks again to the level of manipulation that is persisting to this day. And so Twiz saying if there's CP involving child on Team Piano Man. I am Team Daughter. Yeah, same. I mean, for sure. And by the way, we read it last night, guys. One of the lawsuits, the Jane Doe minor child lawsuits that's been filed. And when I say filed, the filed against Brad Post, which is the fiance, and the mother, is the daughter. The daughter, there's a guardian ad litem on her behalf, but on behalf of the daughter, has filed a lawsuit against her mother's estate and Brad Post. And if her mother had been alive, it would have been against the mother for ongoing sexual abuse, creating and disseminating CP, and the mother was participating in it, according to the allegations. The mother was, apparently there are photos and videos where the mother and the child are participating in this CP. And they also mentioned financial gain, which means they were disseminating for financial gain. And they also mentioned not just the mental and emotional implications of this, but they said medical, like in other words, she needs ongoing medical treatment. So there must be injuries. And they also said that as far as the daughter and the friend, they were threatened with bodily harm if they didn't comply. What are you guys talking about here? I'm just trying to catch up on the chat here. Absolutely. The accused is, again, there's huge support for him in the community. Decent doesn't even, like, literally has never done anything wrong in his life. I mean, this is like not, I mean, yeah, beyond decent, right? Apart from the murder, potentially. Yeah, I would agree. If it were like, if I were to say what would be, if I think that like an extended probation, maybe a bracelet. I mean, it's like, I don't know. If hypothetically, if we go back in time and we're saying, okay, like, let's make him a deal, blah, blah. I mean, this is, yeah, it's, right. And that's a good point. I'm way behind. Yep. I think it's worse than that case in a lot of ways. Well, I don't know. I'm not up on all the newest stuff with that case, but like, again, even because this wasn't just with the daughter, this was also with the daughter's friend, which I think lived in the neighborhood, and the mother not just knowing about it, but being in it, like, well, right, of course. Sorry. I'm just thinking in terms of the CP. But yeah, I guess that would also be a distinction, though, between the two cases. Yeah, I think most people think she knew, but participating, I don't think there's evidence of that yet. That's just so, you don't really hear, like, that's unusual, right? Where the mother is participating and they're disseminating it. Like, I can't think of examples of that. I'm sure it's happened, but that's again where it's like next level, and in this case, of course, too, right? Because again, that's the reason for the motions to eliminate. Yeah, the friend also, yeah. For years, for years, it looks like. Right. I think that's correct, Heather. And knowing about it and not doing anything is that's already so bad, right? But like participating and like, now we don't know, and we've talked about this too, like we don't know, maybe just thinking about there's so many possibilities here. Could Christina, the victim, could she also have been threatened into doing it? We don't know. Now, the thing is if she had a background as an escort, does that play in? Does that mean that maybe she's more open to I just don't know. There's also, we covered it last night too, there's also the bestiality, and they're apparently that there's evidence of that with the bestiality with the not with the daughter, but with the victim and with Bradley Post. And that was also part of what was going on. And remember, she was a veterinarian or a vet tech or something, and had dogs coming in and out of the house and was using those dogs for other things. So, but the thing that is so crazy here regarding the guardian ad litem is this is saying the guardian ad litem knew. This blew my mind. And I don't even know what to make of that, because if that's true, that we are in trouble if that's true. Because the thing is that what I find hard to believe, if you're the guardian ad litem, she knows an affidavit, right? That's going to be on the record. So let me read this again more carefully, because words matter. Zach submitted an affidavit to the guardian ad litem and the family court in which he alleged that AM needs to be with Mello for her own good. So, okay. Because what I'm thinking here is the guardian ad litem knows that if she's aware of actually substantiated claims of CP and finds evidence to support that, and she does nothing, she could face criminal charges. Being disbarred would be automatic, let alone if she knew about it and then lied on the stand and all. I mean, that's so hard to fathom. So that's why I'm like, maybe let's read this again more carefully. So Zach submitted an affidavit in which he alleged. So I'm wondering if potentially here it's because Zach made these allegations and they were the same allegations that Mello was making. And remember, she said she couldn't find anything to substantiate it, which is why it's weird, right? Because apparently it was going on. So this is what I keep talking about, how we're in like these dual realities here, right? Where there's these allegations that are being made, but they can't find evidence that it exists. But apparently it was happening. I don't know. The other thing that is odd, right? Remember we talked about this on this came up, I think, the first live stream of this case that we did, where if you are, and Heather will remember this because she made a good analogy. If you are, so when Bradley Post and Christina Parcell were being also sent all these different envelopes full of the pornographic images, and they were being, the harassment, right? They contacted law enforcement to come in and open an investigation. And what we were saying is, wait a second, if you're creating CP and you're doing all this stuff, the last thing you would want to do is bring it to law enforcement's attention, even though it's not CP. The last thing you want to do is be, hey, law enforcement, hey, can you guys look into this? We're being sent all these pornographic images that portray the victim as an escort, blah, blah. It's like the joke that Heather made was it's like calling the police. If you're a drug dealer and you call the police and say, hey, someone's calling me a drug dealer. And I was like, yeah, that makes no sense. Why would you do that? Right? So I have no clue, guys. I know, Abby, right? I mean, it's just, good night, Kimmy. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Heather put in the chat exactly what I was saying. Yeah. It is. Great. Yeah. Heather. Right. Yes. Pitbullpotamus is Heather's dog for anyone who doesn't know. So what I'm saying here, though, is if you're the guardian ad litem and you're getting an affidavit and it references things about Mello, it could be that she dismissed it because she had been hearing this from John Mello for so long and couldn't find anything to substantiate it. The question that I keep having, though, is how is that possible if there were things to substantiate it? It's like, what is happening? Was this stuff happening or not? And that's where Denise, especially, shout out to Denise. She's a defense attorney in California who's here usually. She might be here at some point. That's where Denise was like, she actually said that it could be AI. She said she actually had a client who she was able to prove that it was a virus. I'm going to try to paraphrase it. It was a virus that somebody else had put on the computer that made it look like the CP was there and all that, right? I'm paraphrasing, but she could be more technical about it. But basically, this happened to a client of hers and he was acquitted of producing CP, and it was like AI and it was a virus, and it can happen. And if that's, I mean, with what we've heard about Mello, that's not out of the realm of possibility at all. Not out of the realm of possibility at all. Could be. And then that could be maybe potentially why it's like, oh, it exists, but it doesn't exist. I don't know, guys. It's so insane. Okay, so here's the last paragraph. With Mello in Italy, with law enforcement and the family court not acting to stop Post and Parcell, with the knowledge that Post and Parcell had unfettered access to AM every day, with the knowledge that Parcell was a sociopath and Post was a wealthy fan of CP, Zach knew he was AM's only chance at survival. So at this point, though, what efforts has he made according to this again, there's only one page, but what efforts has he made? The efforts he's made according to this say that he's mailed out nude photographs to hope she would stop, submitted an affidavit to the guardian ad litem, called DSS. It doesn't ever say he called the police, does it? Doesn't say he ever called the police, which is a problem. And that's why I'm pushing back here. Zach knew he was AM's only chance of survival. Had he actually called the police, maybe that would stand a little bit, again, not an excuse for murder to me, but still, maybe this would have a little bit more credibility here. But he didn't. It looks like, according to this, again, this is just one page. I feel like, though, if he had called the police, they would have included it before stating this here, that he's the only chance of survival, right? Quote, I thought I had to act to save the child's life. I told myself I can't go on with my great life and leave her to drown. Zach went about saving AM. Right. The police would need evidence, but regardless, if he called the police, regardless of what they find, if he called the police, that at least would show on the record another step that he made towards whether it was true or not. Let's just say, again, whether it's true or not, if you're going with, did Zach fully believe that this is true? And did he do everything he could prior to acting on it himself? At least if he called the police, then that would be on the record that he took every step, right? Regardless of if it's true or not. Because again, if you go with somebody's gaslighting you so you think it's true, or whether it's actually true, either way, for the person who commits the act, they think it's true, right? So that's the part that matters in terms of going to, what did Zach believe, right? What did Zach do in terms of acting off of what he believed, whether those things were substantiated or not? What actions did he take? So at least that would be like, look, he even called the police. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's just my thought. So now let me go back to this. It is very bizarre. I agree, Beach Bum. Okay. So that was the defense of others' defense. And again, I'll keep looking. That full document will be available, I'm sure, at some point, or I would think anyway. Certain things might be redacted if there's specifics regarding the things done to the child, but I don't know. We'll see. So then Judge Fant says, a defendant in the state cannot take law into their own hands. Yeah. Judge takes another break. Judge came back briefly. The defense is looking for clarification about what Hughes could say if he took the stand. This is really important, right? Specifically asking the judge what he would be allowed to say when he goes to why he did it. The judge says, no, he would not be allowed to. Mormon, that's one of the defense attorneys, says, that's astonishing, Your Honor. The defense attorneys have left to speak with Hughes. The judge is back in his chamber. So in other words, they're now weighing it out. Well, if he can't say why he did it and involve the CP, they're probably rethinking, should he take the stand, right? Obviously, because what the question that DSN had earlier, what is he possibly going to say in terms of why he did it if he can't get into this whole thing? The judge is back. The defense says they're ready for opening statements. They bring the jury in. So we heard those, and clearly Zach still intends to testify. But what the fuck is he going to say? We don't know. Gives the opening statement. And these are some quotes from the opening statement that we watched. Hughes will take the stand. Again, this is all quotes from the opening statement. A just cause. Judge asks the attorneys to approach the bench, and then they're breaking, and that's what we just saw in the court feed. So they're breaking. And then court is back in session. The defense is calling investigator Dan Bevel. So now that's where we will pick up with the court feed here.
Truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
This is in front of the jury. There's going to be some other witnesses we're going to hear about. We don't see. Usually when stuff's outside the presence of the jury, most of the time, right? When the jury's gone, they still keep the cameras rolling. So we see witnesses. If they're doing like a voir dire or a proffer, we still see it. In this case, we aren't seeing it. Probably because if it's off camera and it's outside the presence of the jury, they're probably not allowing the cameras because it's, again, involving the CP. And that's me trying to think of maybe why the heck we're not seeing it. So this is the only witness that we get to see. And then we will read about the other witnesses who were there outside the presence of the jury and not with cameras present.
Please state your name for the record.
Daniel Bevel.
Investigator Bevel, you were called in the state's case in chief. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And my understanding is it correct that you began working for the sheriff's office, Greenville County Sheriff's Office, roughly in 2012? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you got a bachelor's degree from Troy University. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You testified about this previously, but briefly, tell this
Good
jury
night, Abby.
what units you have served in the sheriff's office.
I started in patrol from 2012 to 2017.
Yes,
That's your
yes, you
standard.
may have asked this before I addressed it, but yes, jury is there now for this one witness. Jury's there. I think we can safely say that if we're seeing a witness, jury's there, because it seems like whenever the jury is dismissed, they also cut the cameras, because we've not seen them argue outside the presence of the jury this entire time, except for the arguing they did before opening statements about the motion in limine. Everything else since the trial started, when they've been arguing outside the presence of the jury, it's not shown us any of that. So
Standard uniform patrol deputies answer 911 calls, any kind of call for service. After that, I went to specialized investigations from 2017 on to, in there, I went to the Crimes Against Children unit from 2017 to 2019. That's any kind of child abuse.
now, here's the thing. Remember when I was saying how crazy it is, right? If you are doing CP stuff, and remember when I said it's crazy that you would contact law enforcement about stuff that involves new photos, period, right? And all that. This is the guy they contacted. And so when we heard him testify for the state, I was also further shocked to learn that his background is in crimes against children. So not only did they contact law enforcement about the pictures that they were getting, they contacted somebody who specialized in crimes against children. Again, it's like being like what this, you know?
Child neglect, child sex crimes. Then after that, 2019 to 2023, I went to the Internet Crimes Against Children unit. That's any kind of child exploitation.
And Investigator Bevel, you talked about your time in the Crimes Against Children unit. When you're in a specific unit within the sheriff's office, do you receive specialized training associated with that type of unit?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so when you were on the road in uniform patrol, did you receive specialized training related to that?
Yes, sir.
And when you were in the unit of crimes against children, did you receive specialized training in that discipline?
Yes, sir.
And let me show you. Let me show you Defense Exhibit 65. Just take a look at this for identification only.
Yes, sir.
Investigator Bevel, for example, that is the report you drafted for the purpose of the harassment investigation. Is that correct?
It is, sir.
And so this is of the kind of report you would draft depending on what investigation you were conducting or what tasks you were performing with the sheriff's office.
That's correct.
As an investigator, are you familiar with a phrase called the lead investigator?
Yes, sir.
And ultimately, the lead investigator is just that the investigator on a case who is ultimately responsible for the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in this case, Investigator Sparkman would be deemed or likely to be the lead investigator. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you also the lead investigator in another case in connection with this case? Let me ask it a different way. On October the 19th, 2021, did you become the lead investigator in another case?
Ye-
Objection.
Objection. This is going to fall under your previous ruling.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection.
That's the motion in limine.
Your Honor, due to your Honor's previous order with the restriction,
Wow.
I'm gonna move on, and I'm gonna move on.
You know, the thing is this, if you're on the jury though, right? They've got to be like, what the hell are they not letting us hear about? That seems like it's important, right? If you're on the jury, you're like, hang on. And it's the state that's keeping it out. That's what they're hearing. They're hearing like right there. He's like, you know, it's related to this case, October 19th or whatever it was. And it's like state objects. And it's like, okay, you can't talk about it. And it's like, if you're on this jury, you'd be like, wait, what? You know what I mean? No, it's the defense. This is the defense case, the defendant's case in chief, right? So now everything is flip-flopped from the state's case in chief. So whenever we're on direct examination now, remember the ticker at the bottom will always have what day it is, the witness number, who's testifying, assuming I can spell their name because they don't ask people to spell their names in this trial for whatever reason, and if it's direct or cross or redirect or what have you. So now that everything's flip-flopped and we're in the defendant's case in chief, the defense attorneys are questioning on the witnesses under direct examination, and the state will be doing cross. So this is one of the defense attorneys.
Investigator Venable, you testified, as you said, in the state's case in chief, and that was just last week, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
And I would imagine you're still familiar with your testimony in the state's case in chief.
Yes, sir.
And I want to talk to you about that testimony. And specifically, I want to refer to a specific portion of it. Do you remember during your direct examination, you testified about mailers and the contents of mailers that you had been provided in the early summer and through the summer of 2021. Do you remember that testimony?
I believe so. Are you referring to the mailers as what I was given by Postman Parcell?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you testified that those mailers had nude photographs of Christina Parcell in those mailers. Is that
Interesting.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And I've got a transcript. I want to ask you specifically about this exchange. Do you remember being asked by Mr. Wilkins when you first got these photos? Let me back up. Do you remember testifying about the fact there's a website listed on the photographs? Do you remember testifying to that?
Yes, sir.
The escort website.
And do you remember Mr. Wilkins asking you about questions about different fonts and different placement? Remember that?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember Mr. Wilkins asking you this question? Now, when you first got these photos, did you attempt to try to find the website on there? Do you remember that question?
Yes, sir.
And you testified, yes, sir. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then do you remember Mr. Wilkins asking you, how'd you do that? And you testified, I just typed the address into one of our computers in the office. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, to y'all's question, remember, I think Future was said, but it was a good question. Like, didn't they try to go to the website and then there was something about a Wayback Machine? And I was referencing what happened during the state's case in chief, and I said that there was no mention of a Wayback Machine, but that he just said he tried to go to the website. Anyway, see, they're following up with that now. So let's see what happens.
And do you remember Mr. Wilkins asking you, and what did you find? And you testified that the website no longer worked. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then do you remember Mr. Wilkins asking you, so you put belladondigiorno.com escort site and put it in your computer, and you responded, yes, sir. Do you remember that?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
And he asked you what happened, and you said, it just redirected me to another escort website. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then then he asked you, were any of those photos on that escort site? And remember, you testified no.
I'm sorry, I got an objection. Can I?
I'm almost done. I'm almost.
Oh, wow.
One more line. You remember Mr. Wilkins asked you,
Now, I want to say real quick, in case anyone's like, well, hold on, what the escort website, how come that's coming in, but the CP isn't? Here's why, I think, because the state has charged the defendant with the harassment charges, right? The harassment charges are because of sending these nude photographs and this shit about the websites and all that, right? The escort website. So if they didn't, like, they can't substantiate that charge without allowing that in. And there must have been discussions pre-trial about how that was not considered to be, well, I guess if the state wants it in, then no one's, like, in other words, there maybe was not a motion in limine to keep this out, because the state wouldn't have made a motion in limine to keep it out because they need it to prove the why do I keep thinking kidnapping, harassment charges. And the defense wouldn't have made a motion in limine to keep it out because it goes to, it's somewhat related and goes to kind of part of their theory of the case. Again, there's a lot of overlap there, right? So that's why the jury's already heard a lot about the nude photos and the escort site. Now, what's been happening is there's like a back and forth about, was she actually an escort? Was it just all fabricated, or was this even a real website? Because that's sort of the question, right? Was she actually an escort, or was this just fabricated? And so we're still kind of going over that here.
were any of those photos on that escort site? And you responded, no, sir. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then just one more. Do you remember he asked you, was any pictures or were any pictures of Christina Parcell on any of those websites that you found? And you testified, no, sir. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Well, and remember, as far as the harassment, they've got really good proof here with this, that through the WhatsApp messages and the emails and stuff, that both of them, as in Zach and Mello, like Mello directly asked Zach to disseminate these, right? And I think and both sides are agreeing. The state's agreeing that happened so that they can charge Zach with the harassment. And the state's agreeing because and that's what we just covered in their motion, because they're saying that was the first step he took to try to save the child, right? So everybody's in agreement that Mello, that at the behest, that's the word the state used, at the behest of John Mello, Zach disseminated these pictures and all this stuff. Again, not with the CP, just with the victim and the escorting thing.
Isn't it true that in the harassment report that I just showed you, Defense Exhibit
When I've got another objection I need to make, I need to spit it.
Wow.
Yeah, this is, I mean,
I'm sorry.
Do they come back? They come back in a second. Okay, let me just go forward a little bit here. Not far. Okay.
You know,
Sure. Sure.
Yes, sir.
isn't true in your report on, and you're asked what happened, and you testified it just redirected me to another escort website.
Okay, that's got to be about where we need to be.
I had
All right.
reminded you of your testimony from last week, wherein you were asked the following about typing in this website, and you're asked what happened, and you testified it just redirected me to another escort
That would be
website.
crazy.
Then where you were asked, were any of those photos on that escort website? And you testified, no, sir. And then you were asked, which you previously testified to, were any of the pictures of Christina Parcell on any of those websites that you found? No, sir. You remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
Isn't true in your report on the harassment allegations.
Your Honor, I'm reading.
Your Honor.
Again?
Witness 611C.
Holy
He testified in the
fuck.
state. He's a member of Greenville County Sheriff's Office. I have every single right to lead in pursuant to 611C.
Your Honor, he's their witness. They called it. In
Okay.
direct examination.
Witness, so I'm just saying.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to show you Defense Exhibit 65 again. Look at this bottom paragraph. Would you please read what I have bracketed to the jury?
Yes, sir. I photographed the 6 envelopes and the contents of the open ones. The open ones were addressed to Brad Post. One contained black and white nude images of Parcell with the address checklist. The images have a web address of http://belladonna.digiorno.escort-site.com. I checked this web address and it was not valid. It redirected me to another escort site under a different URL. The other contained several of the same images, but were not in color.
So is it true, based on this report, that you were redirected to other websites that had the same images that were in those envelopes? Isn't that correct?
No, sir.
Okay. Isn't that what you said in your report?
That's poorly worded on my part, but I meant the other envelopes. Same images were not in color.
What are you saying you meant?
The images that were in the other envelopes, not another website.
Oh, what?
So didn't you say that you found these on the internet? Isn't that what you said in your report?
No, sir.
Tell me again what you said. Yeah, please read it again, to the jury. Read it again.
Oh, dear.
It's okay if I go to the relevant part instead of
Yeah,
everyone.
they've got a bracket there.
Oh my God.
Photographed 6 envelopes and the contents of the open ones. The open ones were addressed to Brad Post. One envelope, or it just says one contained black and white nude images of Parcell with the address checklist. The images have the web address of http:// belladonnadigiorno.escort-site.com. I checked this web address and it was not valid. It redirected me to another escort site under a different URL. The other contained several of the same images, but were in color. Now, like I explained, it's poor wording on my part, but I was referring to the other envelopes contained several of the same images, but they were in color. I wasn't referring to another website.
And in your report, you distinguish between envelopes and websites.
Like I said, it was just poor wording, but I was referring to just other envelopes have the same images, just in color.
Okay. At first, I was like, hang on, that seems real Weasley. But considering that the wording is he starts with one envelope. No. Actually, he says one has, and he's like saying he meant to say envelope. He says one, and then he corrects himself, envelope, but that's not printed. Let me show you guys what I mean. Interesting.
Okay. Photographed 6 envelopes and the contents of the
Okay. So 6 envelopes, right? So that matters.
ones were addressed to Brad Post. One envelope, or it just says one contained black and
See, one contained, but you can tell he's referencing the envelopes because he says 6 envelopes and then he says one contained. And so that matters because then if it's like what going to the end of it here of his recitation, if you will.
site under a different URL. The other contained several of the same images, but were in color. Now,
Okay, but hold on. That doesn't actually make sense because the other, that would make it sound like if there's 2 envelopes. That's what I was thinking. If there were 2 envelopes and then you're like one contained and then you're like the other contained, unless he means the other 5.
like I explained, it's poor wording on my part, but I was referring to the other envelopes contained several of the same images.
Okay, the other envelopes. Okay.
But they were in color.
It is
I wasn't
poor
referring
wording.
to another website.
And in your report, you don't distinguish between envelopes and websites. Do you?
Like I said, it was just poor wording, but I was referring to just other envelopes have the same images, just in color.
And is it true that it is very possible that those images could have been online and just taken down the time you tried to look at it? Is that true?
In another website? Is that what you're referring?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
One second. Those are all the questions I would ask Investigator Bevel in this context.
Well, never mind. Jury's not present. Never mind. He just said, that's so funny. He said, those are all the questions I would ask. See, we wouldn't know. Like, up until this point, it looked like the jury was present. But then he says, those are all the questions I would ask. Unless, okay, hold on. I think what happened was it was in front of the jury. And then remember the camera cut out? They actually showed us the proffer, I guess. It's confusing because they didn't make it clear. They just like, whatever. So this is that. So this last part with those questions was not in front of the jury, but the first questions were. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have anything further.
Seems like.
Please, Corey, briefly. Did you ever find naked photos of Christina Parcell on the internet when you checked?
No, sir.
It didn't exist that you could find.
Not that I could find.
No further.
Nothing else, right? Okay. Your Honor, there is, Your Honor, pursuant to your previous ruling, I would like to present some information in the absence of the jury.
Well, he just said in the absence of the jury. I hate that they cut this shit out and then you don't hear what they're saying. It's just, they cut the sound. Like, okay, let me just go back to the beginning of his testimony and just now I want to double check and be sure. Because like, it just cuts to him. So the part that's missing is like, normally when it's like, bring the jury and then it's like, okay, great. Now there's no confusion about that. You know what I mean? Okay. Normally, again, they've been at lunch. So normally you'd hear them be like, okay, jury, did you have a good lunch? Let's see what happens.
So again, let's pick up where we left off. I had reminded you of your testimony.
Okay, no, that's still, I need to go back a little further. Okay.
Investigator Dan Bell.
Research or anything concerning this?
Yeah. Okay. So the jury was present. So here he's talking to the jury. So that's confirmed. That was in front of the jury. And then there were all those objections. And then the last bit of testimony was outside the presence of the jury. Okay. Now we know. And I think that's it for the day, though. Yep. Okay. So now let's go back to our updates from the court people in the court here. Okay. So there we have the first defense witness. The defense is asking about specialized training that he received as part of the Internet Crimes Against Children. Defense is asking about, or is trying to ask about Bevel's involvement in the investigation of Post. The state objects, citing the judge's previous rulings, sustains. Defense is asking about his involvement with harassment charges. State says they have an objection the jury sent out. Okay, there we go. State says the defense only called Bevel to impeach his prior testimony. The judge overrules. State begins cross-examination. They ask if he ever found nude images of Parcell online. Bevel says no. He's dismissed and asked the jury and asked to present some evidence outside the presence of the jury. Now the cameras are cut, like we just saw. Okay, defense says they would have asked Bevel about his 2018 investigation into Post. So this is for the record for appeal, if there's a conviction. Defense says they would have asked Bevel about his 2018 investigation into Post and that it would have revealed Bevel failed to uncover. Oh my God, so this is exactly to what we were just saying. Okay, failed to uncover the sexual abuse that was happening. So, but that's interesting though, right? Does that mean he failed to uncover it because it wasn't? Oh my God, failed to uncover the sexual abuse that was happening. So they're presenting this as if the sexual abuse was happening and law enforcement failed to uncover it because they suck. But also you can see the state probably pushing back and saying it wasn't happening and that's why he didn't uncover it, right? Oh man. The defense is now proffering the testimony of the owner of the Outman cigar bar. Now this is the cigar bar owned by the victim's father. The defense is summarizing what his testimony would have been if they'd been able to call him. Defense. After Post was arrested, the owner checked Post's locker at the cigar bar and found multiple thumb drives and hard drives inside. At the cigar bar? That's really interesting. Was there like a whole operation going on? Is this being disseminated through something with like, and remember, the way that Post met the victim 20 years prior was through this cigar bar that the dad owned. Interesting. What? Oh my God. The defense says they would have called the law enforcement officer who took those electronic devices into custody. Reminder, this is all taking place outside the view of the jury. The defense says the electronic devices seized from the cigar bar contained images of Parcell and her daughter. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The defense says the next person they would call is the guardian ad litem. They want to call her. Oh my God. And again, it says would call. The reason again being they want to get into all this stuff. And so he's making a record. And because they aren't going to be able to do any of this. The defense says he would testify about the custody case and that Post had that she would testify about the custody case and that Post had a, quote, creep factor, end quote. The defense says the testimony would have also included Cormillo's knowledge of a deposition in which Parcell said she took part in a pornographic film and that investigators showed her the, okay. Now we're getting, so remember how I was saying when we looked at the defense motion and I was like, well, you know, the guardian ad litem saw the thing in the affidavit, but like, again, that was allegations made by John Mello. So it's reasonable that she could dismiss that. This is a whole different thing. If this is true, investigators showed the guardian ad litem pornographic images of Parcell and her daughter. Again, going back to what I said before, this is so hard to believe because she could be facing criminal charges and lose her bar license. Like, I just don't. I mean, they need to, if they really want to figure this out, they need to call the investigators and they need to figure out, like, this is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Totally agree. It could be generational. You guys, though, I wish Denise were here. I wish Denise were here to hear this. Yeah, I'm sure, because I'm a fast talker. I wish Denise were here to hear this because, my brain, The defense says the testimony would have also included Cormella's knowledge of a deposition in which Parcell said she took part in a pornographic film and that investigators showed the guardian ad litem pornographic images of Parcell and her daughter. Right, as if she knew and did, right. I mean, not only did nothing, but also she completely, I mean, I guess she didn't directly lie in her testimony on direct or for the state because she couldn't be asked directly about this. But it's a problem that she was like, yeah, like the child was safe and blah, 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 right? Knew and did nothing. Which again, it's wild because that is actually that's actually what John Mello is alleging in the lawsuit against her, which is the defense says they would have also called another investigator who was taking part in the investigation of Post devices. Testimony would have included the investigator's findings, thousands of images of child CSAM. The judge intervened saying they don't need to go into so much detail. Oh boy. The defense says the next witness they would have called is their own expert on digital forensics. The defense asked him to review the files extracted from Post devices. He would have testified about the content of the images. We know no one wants to hear that. The defense is preparing to read more descriptions of the images. The judge reminds them to speak in generalities. Wow. The defense's descriptions are important because they show the extent of harm crucial to their case. That's valid. That's valid. If it's like, this is just how bad it was. Now, there also needs to be then, I would imagine, a connection to show that Zach Hughes knew this and saw these images, right? But to the extent that he did, if that's what they're claiming, then yes, the extent of harm would be crucial. I agree. They are allowed to mark the descriptions as a court's exhibit. Okay. Jury is being brought back in. Jury is dismissed for the day. Defense is going to proffer the summaries of witnesses. Court takes a break, back in session. The defense is calling a witness to the stand to proffer his testimony. And they bring in Dr. David Corwin, a psychiatrist who specializes in child sexual abuse. Again, all outside the presence of the jury and the cameras. Corwin is qualified as an expert in the areas of psychiatry and child sexual abuse. Corwin says child sexual abuse has been found to be strongly associated with a variety of adverse outcomes that include. So the reason they want to bring him in, right, is to say these are all the bad things that will happen to the child. I mean, again, I don't know that it even needs to be. I feel like it goes without saying, but yeah. Behavioral, psychological, biological. He says the child abuse is one of the most toxic major stressors a child can experience, of course. Corwin says it can accelerate aging and is associated with shorter lifespans. And this is the same type of testimony that will happen whenever, if indeed those civil suits go to trial. If they aren't settled, then yes, then this will be really important for showing the damages for the plaintiffs. The state begins cross. After a brief cross, Corwin is dismissed. They don't even say what happened in cross. Maybe it wasn't noteworthy. Hughes tells the judge he's decided to testify still. Court is dismissed and will resume at 9:30 tomorrow. So this is great because we've been trying to figure out what time court actually resumes. And then because we know there's a 30-minute delay on the cameras. So this court resumes at 9:30, which means the court feed, they have that 30-minute delay. So 10 o'clock, I guess. Like it might be that they can show the wall, but they can't show anything from what happens in court at 10. And it remains to be seen what will happen. I mean, like this case is wild, right? Like you really can't, you have no idea. And it's hard too, again, because of the fact that they keep us, we're kind of in the dark with all the cameras cutting out and whatnot. It's hard to know what to expect. And, again, like today we had, I don't know, what was that? Maybe 20 minutes max of actual things to see besides the wall with like a 5.5 hour court feed. So that's where we are here with this case. They will resume at 9:30 and, that would mean that again, for us, it would be, I guess, 10 o'clock that anything would be available to be shown if it is available to be shown, right? Like, but again, who knows what will happen. So, and the other thing, it seems like, they wanted to call these other witnesses, but they can't because they can't get into what they would testify about. So I wonder if he's decided to testify. I mean, that means he could be first. Because that sounds like they did the colloquy, which normally they'll do the colloquy immediately before. So if I were to try to say, what is the big picture here that I see with everything? It looks like the witnesses that they intended to call for their case in chief, the defense, right, was Daniel Bevel, who we saw. That was very brief testimony. And then again, they intended to call the guardian ad litem. They intended to call, I think there was a law enforcement officer in there, or maybe more than one, investigators, and they intended to call this Dr. David Corwin. So in other words, they're making their case in chief would have had a number of witnesses, right? But it looks like at this juncture, their case in chief is going to potentially only have 2 witnesses. We don't know. There could be somebody after Zach. I think a lot hinges though on what happens. Like, what the fuck? What's he going to testify to? Will the state open the door on cross? Anything can happen here. Like, if that door is opened somehow, this trial will be completely different. It'll be a lot longer, and we will learn, and we'll learn a lot more. It'll be, if the door is opened, then all this is going to come in, and it's going to be completely just, oh my God, I just can't even, So the state, now, having said that, the state's going to have to be really careful on cross, right? And actually, just for, Twiz asked a question in the Discord about like what would happen, for example, if like Zach Hughes just like isn't prompted, but just starts getting into it, right? And just starts talking about some of these things. And I said, well, what would happen is the state would object to non-responsive because it's non-responsive to a question. However, as they all say, you can't unring the bell. So, and I don't know that he would do that. He might, if for example, he slips in like, maybe he's answering a question and then it leads into that, or it's just completely unprompted and he just gets a couple words out really quickly. Who knows, right? If the jury, they have to, it's a reaction time thing, right? They have to be able to react really quickly on those objections, like, and so it's tough, right? Because sometimes we see this happen where it's like they're starting out with something that seems innocuous and it's responsive to the question, but then they segue into the other thing, and that's like objection, because once the jury hears it, then they've already heard it. You know what I mean? And not that would be enough to open the door if they make that objection, but it would be like, well, now the jury's heard it. That's all the defense. The defense needs the jury to hear, and they've been leaving, as they said, like in the thing we watched last night from Fitz News, they've been leaving these little breadcrumbs. I don't know that it's enough to suggest the child stuff, though. I don't think that there's been enough to suggest that. I think it's clear to the jury that there's other things going on that they're not allowed to talk about, and they don't know what. But again, the thing about the child is really crucial to trying to support this vigilante justice thing. The other thing that's interesting is this. To the end, even if they could get into that, even if they could do that, right? What they're essentially arguing is jury nullification, which is a whole other thing. And the reason I think it's like, that's not really being talked about a whole lot at this juncture is because of the motion to eliminate. But that's a whole other thing. Like, let's just say that let's just say the state opens the door and now they can get into it. And Zach can testify to all these things, and maybe they can bring in these other witnesses and all this, right? What they're going for is jury nullification. This is not an affirmative defense, as the judge said. The law of South Carolina and nowhere in this country says that you can take this into your own hands and kill somebody. It doesn't say that. So that's a whole other interesting facet, because like that's what they would be going for, is jury nullification. That's which and again, thinking about strategy wise, had they just said we're not going to present a case, they could have gotten potentially an acquittal just based on the jury was like, what, we were just confused and the state didn't prove it. I think that was entirely possible. I don't think they could have gotten a conviction. My take on when the state rested is I don't think they would have gotten a conviction. I think the best case scenario for the state would have been like a hung jury. Best case scenario for the state, but I think acquittal would have been likely. So I don't know, guys. It's wild though. Yeah, Me Too Future. We don't really have enough information about Zach Hughes' background in life but like just thinking about this theoretically, we heard about the 5 foster kids, right? Now, it seems like he has a good relationship with his parents. So I'm just thinking in terms of like his background, right? So maybe the reason these kids were brought into their care, or what were they, fostered or adopted? I don't remember, but what either way, let's just say, for the sake of like thinking this through as an exercise for the brain. Like, let's just say that these kids were adopted or in foster care, I can't remember which it was, because they were in a home where they were subjected to this type of thing, right? And that Zach was close with these, I guess, siblings, if you will, and heard about this, and that this is and that is part of his background. So let's just say that only the state can open the door unless something comes out on defense and the state doesn't object. But generally that wouldn't happen. It would normally come from the state. So I'm thinking like on cross-exam. So let's just say like on cross-exam, and this is where the state has to be really careful. So like, let's say on the cross-exam, the state is like, asking something about his childhood. Like that's probably why they probably wouldn't, right? But let's just say, and then a responsive answer to that question elicits testimony where that is a responsive answer to the question, right? Again, the questions from the state are going to matter in a big way. If they ask a question and he answers with a responsive answer, like we saw this in Murdoch, right? I was saying how to Twiz in the Discord how there were so many motions in limine and the door got opened on every single one of them in Murdoch. The reason was because there were questions that were asked, and the responsive answer to the only way to answer that question, you had to reference the other thing. Now the door is opened. We've seen this in so many cases, right? Like where the door is opened. I'm trying to think of other examples off the top of my head, but Murdoch is of course going to be the first thing that comes to mind. What would happen again, just for the sake of example, let's say that the state asks that type of question and then Zach, answers it in a response that is responsive to the question. And then the state would probably at that point object. And they would probably say something like, they wouldn't be able to object to non-responsive, but they could try, or they might say objected, violates the court's order. They would dismiss the jury and then they would argue. And I hope that they wouldn't cut the fucking cameras for this moment, but and then the judge, and then again, we're imagining a situation in which the door would be open. So therefore, in this example, right, the judge might say, well, hey, you opened the door. You asked the question. That's the answer you got. You opened the door. Coming in, incoming. Bombs dropped everywhere. What are you referencing here? Oh, I see what you're saying. So the reason I say that though, Future, is because did you see the Fitz News thing or did you watch the live stream from last night? Because the reason I'm saying it is because when you hear what they said about the jury, especially when it came to the DNA evidence, is they said the jury was like bored and that they were not even like paying attention. Like, what they were saying is like that, at the moment when they go to that point where it's like, okay, the DNA under the fingernails, that was like the end of the state's case. That should have been a big moment. And that, like they said, that usually you'll see that the jury will react to that and you'll see that resonate with them. And they said they didn't see that resonate with a single juror, like as if they maybe almost missed it. Like they were like the jury, and so because of that, I'm like, that's why I'm saying it could be that they were already so done with this case from the state's case that they just don't even care. I don't know, but their comments on the jury were really fascinating. And that's why I appreciate having that insight from people who are in the courtroom, because, it did not surprise me when they said the jury looks confused. That makes sense. But the part that surprised me was when they said the jury seemed bored certain times, because I that's hard for me to imagine, because it's like, I think the trial's riveting. But they did speak specifically about the part with the DNA, and they were like, the jury just didn't seem to react to that at all. So, yeah, I don't know. I didn't look into any of the background of this case before it started. I just knew piano and knife, and that was basically it. And I knew it was supposed to be a really complex case. Oh, I'm sure they are. The other thing that they talked about on Fitz News that's really interesting, guys, is this. They talked about how, because this jury has there's no doubt that the jury knows things are not coming in, right? Like we've said earlier, that there's things that they aren't privy to. They actually said that they would be they fully believe that at least one or more of those jurors are probably doing research on their own, which they're not supposed to, as we know. But it wouldn't take much if you do any type of Google search, you're going to see Brad post and you're going to learn about the CP. You can't find, except tried, you can't find his like indictment. If he was indicted, I don't remember if he was indicted or if it was an information. You can't find any of that, but you can see what the charges are. And you can easily see that Parcell was involved, and that involved the daughter, right? So yeah, the locals though are definitely aware. And the only way at this point that the jury would be aware would be if they are doing outside research, could change tomorrow. We shall see. Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't have timestamps done for the live stream from last night because I'm behind on timestamps, but yeah, we did break that down last night. There's a lot of really interesting, tidbits in there, getting that perspective. Really interesting things about John Mello too, because they interviewed him twice. Those journalists did. They haven't released those interviews yet, but they talk about their impressions and stuff too. Right now, they would have handled this on voir dire, right? They would have. I'm sure that was, on voir dire. They would have asked those questions because that's just like with anything else, right? With any other case, that I'm sure there were vast. I'm sure there were. Well, okay. Here we go. Perfect example. Remember, this was supposed to go to trial in January, and then they could not seat a jury. That's why they couldn't seat a jury. That's why they tried. They had all these different rounds of juries. They couldn't seat a jury, and they said we will come back and try again a month later to seat a jury. So, oh, yep, that's really funny. Yep, and so the other thing. You could also have, I'm not saying that this would happen, but potentially, right? Because sometimes people say they don't know and they do know, right? What if there's somebody just hypothetically who's like, knew about it and is like, I don't know. Usually these are the things that people say and I'm like, yeah, right. That's like never going to happen. But I don't know. This case is very unique. And apparently in the Greenville community, this is just so like Zach Hughes was already really well known. And in this case, like his face was everywhere. And like, it sounds like, and again, I don't know what the background, like I'm sure there were motions to change venue made, I guess I can't say that for sure. If you think like Murdoch, right? Every now and again, you get cases where they want to stay in the same place because they think that their good reputation will save them. It didn't work for Murdoch. But that was their, I don't know. Could it work here? Maybe, again, he's got a lot of support in the courtroom. I don't think Murdoch had any support except for his own family, but from what we hear with this case with people in the courtroom, he's got community people and family. So anyway, a lot of support for Zach Hughes. And that can make a difference to a jury as well, right? When they see that there's, a lot of people supporting the defendant. It's all very interesting. Oh, 73. I would have thought too. I would have thought it was bigger too, future. That's surprising. 73,000. Wow. Yeah. Make sure you didn't check. Yeah, there's also a Greenville, North Carolina. So make sure it's just in case that you got South Carolina. I'm sure you did. But I was just remembering. I'm like, oh, yeah, there's Greenville, North Carolina, too. I've been to Greenville, South Carolina. I've never been to Greenville, North Carolina. So, but yeah. So, like I said, I think it's possible that Zach will be the first witness tomorrow. And I will try to cover as much as I can. And we'll see what happens as far as, if they start out right away, I'll try to be able to cover it, at the time, probably, go the route of like starting a little bit later just so we can zoom past the inevitable breaks. But I don't know. We'll just have to play it by ear basically and see what happens because that's what, Like, glad I didn't sit around all day today, right? Like for 5.5 hours, and then you get 20 minutes total of actual things happening, which is why I was like, well, I'll just, just go ahead and do this tonight. And I was actually going to cover Karen Reed's hearing as well, but like literally everybody and their mother covered it today, and some probably still are. And so I was like, people at some point probably are sick of it, you know what I mean? So we'll just do that another time. I was going to do it and do like a back-to-back, but so, and I haven't even watched all of it, but I've seen some of the things that happened. And crazy day in the world of trials for sure. Are you saying with Karen Reed? Okay. Yeah, but so specifically though, they are in Greer, I think is what their actual, but the county court, it's Greenville County Courthouse. So I guess they would, I guess so. And actually I remember there was something that came about that. So Greenville County is where the jurors would have been pulled from. So I know there's also a metro area. So maybe Greenville County, I wonder if that's a specific population number as well. So Greenville County, South Carolina has Greenville County, South Carolina has a population of 500,000, thereabouts. So there we go. Yeah. So that makes it even more surprising they couldn't see the jury the first time, right? Crazy. Yeah. In future, I don't know where you were watching it, but I will say again, for people who are not aware, like, I stayed away from Karen Reed because of the toxicity the first time. I literally knew nothing about the case. I stayed completely away from it. I was like, I don't even give a shit. It was like the only thing where I'm like, I'm going to tune that out. I don't care who's talking about it. Even if it's EDB, even if it's lawyer, even if it's STS, I just was like, don't care. I can't stand the toxicity. I'm not doing it. And it was like the only thing I wouldn't watch any coverage of. And until the day of opening statements, when I was doing things around the house and like YouTube put it on, okay, put on opening statements, and it was in the middle of or is it like the beginning of the defense opening, and it was just like whatever the court feed, and I didn't even know, I was just like in the background, right? And I heard Mr. Yannetti, and I heard the opening statements, and it was took about 5 minutes, and I was like, all right, I'm covering it. But people who watched it here, and I'm just quoting them, right? Said that it was the only place they could find on YouTube that didn't have a toxic environment where they could watch it. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. I've been covering it. I plan to cover the next trial, and I welcome anybody who wants a place to come where they can watch it and not have to deal with all that nonsense. I don't actually understand the nonsense, but see, I stay away from stuff like that, So we are a toxic-free environment here. We're toxic-free squirreling. Yeah, I don't even understand it because I've stayed away from it, thankfully. So, that's one of the nice things about covering it, right? Is you can be covering it and you can have your own environment, and then you don't have to be in that realm. So, I the unhingedness blows my mind. I don't get it at all. But with any case, I don't understand. I understand people being passionate, but I do not understand toxicity and all that bullshit drama. I don't understand that for anything in life, to be honest with you. It's just not me, not my style. Okay. Yeah. I would imagine that, like, if in terms of places to be in the chat, I would imagine RA's probably, I don't know about Brandy Churchwell. I've never I don't know much about her like chat, if you will, or the community there. But with recovery, I would hope that there's not that much toxicity there. But I don't know. Cause again, I just don't even delve into it. Okay. Yeah. I know EDB has great mods. Just in terms of the chat, I don't know. It's not all that, there's just so many people, right? That it makes it hard to have like actual communication and conversations for me anyway. But yeah. And I guess the mods matter too, right? I guess that's another thing. See, because I don't have mods, but I don't need them. So we've only ever had to kick one person out, and that's Glenn. So let's just, speaking of Glenn, let's just do this real quick.
I have that skirt.
Writing a book about Wendy. That's Glenn is our legendary troll that we had to, the only person I've ever had to kick out and block. Right, exactly. The chat just moves too fast. Yeah, it's just not even I don't know how it blows my mind when I'm like, people still do this. Why? Like, I don't get it. I literally don't get it. I don't understand the point of it. It's weird to me. I just don't get it. Why they closed what hearing? Oh, Glenn, right? I know future. Yeah. Also, we have the Fievel. We have a lot of great Wendy stuff. There's the Fievel. Let's do
Yesterday I was taking a walk around 5. I met a new friend. We went to Tallahassee food trucks.
Wow.
Last night, hung out with her for hours.
Yeah.
Wendy made another new friend. Are you fucking kidding me? Why?
She also Googled. There was a shooting, do you know? Both she and John.
Stop.
Why would they
I'm
Google?
going to die.
Why would that just come
I'm
up?
going. Sorry, Heather. Heather says, I met a new friend on a walk. Bitch, how old are you?
My friend Elizabeth is a mortician. She's the prettiest mortician I've ever met.
You guys. Andy's friend, the fucking mortician. What is happening?
I ate a lunch. Like, I had a whole delicious lunch. I want to send some text sort of canceling my plans. Like, I'm actually at 6:30. I was supposed to be at a party by now.
We
so
know.
detail.
Dude, I cannot with her.
This is a really hard job you guys have. Sarah, your job is very hard.
Is there any way that you would think
Somebody tried to kill my ex-husband. They should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Famous last words, Wendy. They're coming for you. And if they don't, I will. Just kidding. Oh, we have a lot of these. Oh my God. Exactly. That's absolutely right. Oh, they closed the hearing because it ended early, Twiz. Judge Bev was like, I need to go home and scream into a pillow or something. She ended it early. The hearing was open. It's just that everybody went home. It was done. It was over before it started, and they rescheduled for next week. I forget which day, but am I going? No, I mean, ostensibly I could go, but I don't. So I can't actually go tomorrow. Anyway, but also we're supposed to have like, I haven't even looked yet what the latest is. We're supposed to be getting a lot of snow. Not that matters for me, but I'm just saying it's, so let me see. But yeah, I have a vet appointment for Frodo. Like I wouldn't be able to go because of the drive. I wouldn't be able to go. It wouldn't be worth it. Like I'd only go if I could stay the whole day. Cause I forget. It was like a 3-hour drive. Maybe I would go if I could stay the whole day. Let me see what it says here for doing. So we're supposed to get snow and sleet up to 3 inches in the morning. It's so funny. Everybody's freaking out. I don't get it. Like I got even a voicemail from the vet today and they're like, what does it say? This is so fucking funny. They were like, hey, we have Frodo scheduled. I was calling to give you a heads up. If the weather is bad, there's a chance we won't be here. So I'll call before you come, or if you just get the voicemail number closed. So like even the vet's like, we might not be able to do the appointment. I mean, we've already had more snow than that this year, and nobody freaked out like they are this time. I don't know. It's really weird. I don't know what's going on. So she ended it early because she was pissed. Oh my God. Yeah. Go Zachary. Right. Yeah. For real. Yeah. She ended it early because she was pissed at what she heard from the Commonwealth. However, I have thoughts on that. I have many thoughts on that. And like I was saying, I was going to go right into that. And then I was like, well, everybody's been covering it. So like, I'm not going to like beat everybody over the head with another live stream about it. You know what I mean? But I guess ostensibly I still could. But yeah, I mean, in other words, it'll be easier for me to explain my thoughts when we are actually watching it. But the summary is, I think her reasoning that she gave for ending it early was so everybody can have time to collect themselves, basically. Now, I think she maybe was referencing herself because she seemed mad, but I think she wanted to seem mad. Maybe she genuinely was. Either way, whether she genuinely was mad or wanted to seem mad, it's mad at the defense, right? So there's a bias there, first of all. But second of all, it didn't give the defense a chance to respond to the allegations made by the Commonwealth. Again, bias. So I guess all in all, you could summarize it with bias. Is why? Because it was really unfair to the defense, because there could be very simple explanations for what happened, and it didn't give them a chance to respond. Yeah. Welcome, Echoes of Clarity. I think you might be new here. Welcome to any new squirrel friends. Yeah, the Arcadudes. Well, you find out what next week. There were allegations that were made by the Commonwealth about like the defense with as it pertains to the Arcadudes. And again, it'll be easier. They made a number of allegations, some of which weren't really as they were portrayed. This is how it works, right? They're going to make it look bad, but it may not really be that bad. Some of it you can impeach by going back to trial testimony, which we will do. When I cover it, we'll do it. I can impeach a lot of what Mr. Brennan says, okay? But he portrays it a certain way for the cameras, for the court, and then the court reacts, I'm mad, blah, 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 right? You know, essentially. And then is like, I'm too mad. We need to all collect ourselves, end of the hearing. And then the defense doesn't get to respond. So the defense will, in other words, we will hear from the defense next week. Yes, we'll hear from the defense next week. But in terms of if you were referencing finding out why Judge Bev was so mad or whatever, yes, that you can, we will be streaming that hearing before they come back. We'll do it soon. I mean, again, like I said, I was going to do it tonight, and then I was like, well, but we can do that and whenever, as far as going through that hearing. Yeah, couldn't agree more. She was inappropriate. She needed to put on her big girl judge underdrawer. Yep, absolutely. And it didn't surprise me, right? Because she's never gotten mad like that at the Commonwealth, ever. I could go on a rant. Let me just say this. Instead of going on a rant, I'll just let you guys know, I could go on a rant. Like but there's if I start talking about this, I could go on a rant. Instead, I'll goat. I'll save the rant. I'll save the rant for when we go over the hearing. Instead, I will emergency goat, and then we will rant during the hearing over the bias. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. It makes more sense in context though, because we don't have the hearing, right? Like, makes it makes more sense in context. So do you guys want me to come back with the hearing? Like I was going to do it. And then I was like, well, I bet everyone's sick of it. If y'all aren't sick of it, I can we're done talking about what we have now for Zach Hughes, right? But I could reset up the stream and come back with that if you guys want to do that now. I know. Honestly, I think it was at least somewhat of a wanting to get herself worked up thing. Like maybe I think potentially even if it was subconsciously due to her own bias. Like when I first saw that, I didn't even know what was happening. Like I saw something, DSN said something in the Discord about she was upset. I literally I hadn't seen any of the hearing. I didn't even know what was happening. I was trying to get caught up on timestamps. So I wasn't even watching it. I was like, I had the Zach Hughes thing open to see if the camera moved. And I was doing like timestamps. I didn't even know what was happening. But as soon as I saw that little bit, I turned it on. That's where it was. It was like the moment where she was doing the shaky. And I was like, oh my God, look at her acting mad. That was my first reaction. I was like, she's acting. She's doing that to try to seem mad. I didn't even know the context. That's what I thought. And then I learned more as the day went on. Hi, Rochelle. Yeah, and that's what I literally caught again. And then I've learned more just through osmosis, essentially. But again, I haven't even watched it like fully. Yeah, we love the goat. We love the goat. Oh my God, I can't type. So let me know if you want me to come back with a Karen Reed live stream here in a few minutes. If you guys want to watch the hearing, let me see how long it is, just as is. There was a verdict in the Saparaki. I have not. Does anybody know what that verdict is? I'm sure it's not guilty. I would be shocked if it was. I'm sure he was acquitted, but future, I bet you know. Can you confirm for me real quick while I search for this? I'm searching for the hearing. Two hours, it looks like. Because I know they ended early. I don't know. I guess 2 hours is the hearing. So anyway, let me know if you guys want. Okay, awesome, good, wonderful, good, love it. Jury didn't fail us on that one. Excellent. But no one so far has said to come back with I just knew. You know how I knew? Hold on. Because I have a squirrely crystal ball. So magical. Twiz is saying come back. Anyone else want me to come back with Karen Reed? For anyone who doesn't know, Twiz is in Pullman, Washington. And Rochelle is in hold on, no, don't think, Spokane, Washington. And I meant to ask you, I'm glad I thought of this. Do you go to Trader Joe's? Because I know there's a Trader Joe's in Spokane. And by the way, full circle here moment. I know Future loves Trader Joe's also, and I love Trader Joe's. So that's, anyway, funny. Oh, that's amazing. I'll have to watch that, but that won't happen tonight. But yeah, Heather wants me to come back too. Okay. That's what I said. I said Rochelle is in Spokane. Future's not in Future's not in Spokane. Actually, I don't remember. I don't think I know where Future is. I don't know if Future is. Anyway, I've known Future forever. But anyway, Future loves Trader Joe's. I don't think Future's in Spokane. Yeah, I have a really good memory. I don't think so. So in other words, so we've got Twiz in Pullman, no Trader Joe's. Future, don't think I know where she is, loves Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. Y'all know where I'm at. Oh, you're in Indiana. Oh my God. I keep getting this confused. I'm so sorry. I did this the other day. Who was the one in Spokane? Oh my God, the one. You guys. We have so many new squirrel friends. And so I did this the other day. The person who's in Spokane, I got it mixed up and said they were in Indiana. And somehow I'm getting you two confused. I don't know how I'm getting the other lady. Right. How am I getting you two guys confused? You're in the Southern US. Okay. You're in Indiana. Do you have a Trader Joe's? That's the, so, and I remember because you are close to Delphi, right? Yes. Okay. That's what you'll recognize it. I think I would recognize it too. That's hilarious. And I know you've told me your memory's awful. And so you're actually from Delphi. Okay. Okay. Right. All right. Okay. So, I won't forget this again. I promise you. Rochelle, Delphi. They kind of rhyme. The L in the end of Rochelle and Delphi. I'll remember it. I won't forget it now. And which is great because whoever it is, I'm sorry to whoever you are in Spokane. I also now won't get you. I won't get that mixed up again now. Okay. I need to just come up with a little system. I usually like really though. I just it's an anomaly because like Future said, like I my memory is really good. There's some reason why my brain is switching, you guys. And I don't know what it is. But Trader Joe's is the shit. Future and I love Trader Joe's. And I know there's been other people in the chat who said they also love Trader Joe's. And I actually need to go to Trader Joe's tomorrow. I'm out of my staples. So, okay, I will come back. I got to set up the stream. I'll come back in a few though with Karen Reed since we had a couple people say they want to. We will be back. So I'll go ahead and end this one and I'll set that up and I will see you guys in a few. But as always, love y'all. Thanks for being a squirrel. And I'm going to roll the outro.